All right, welcome to our deep dive on one of the coolest topics in AP Human Geography Unit 6. We're talking all about cities, how they get started, what makes them tick, and what's next for them. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big picture. Why do we even have cities? Then we're going to zoom way in and look at how a city is built. After that, we'll explore the systems that keep everything running. And finally, we'll tackle the huge challenges and really creative solutions that are shaping our cities right now. So, to really get a handle on cities, we've got to start with the absolute basics. Why do they pop up where they do? And what is it that makes them grow so incredibly fast? Well, it really all boils down to two key geographic ideas. First, you've got the site. That's the actual physical piece of land a city's on. Think about New Orleans, right there on the Mississippi River Delta. That's its site. But then, and this is just as important, you have its situation. That's all about where a city is in relation to other places. So for New Orleans, its situation at the mouth of a massive river system made it a powerhouse for trade. One is about the spot, the other is about the network. And you can see that growth just explode on this timeline. The Industrial Revolution kicked the whole thing off, pulling millions of people from farms into cities to work in factories. Then, boom, the 20th century hits, and the car and highways just blew the city's boundaries wide open, creating all the suburbs we know. And the story today? It's the absolutely mind-boggling rise of megacities, especially in developing parts of the world. So what's so fascinating is that the ways cities are spread out across a country, their size, their spacing, it's not random at all. Nope. Geographers have actually found these really clear patterns, these rules that explain the whole urban hierarchy. In a lot of developed countries, you see something called the rank size rule. And it's pretty straightforward. The second biggest city is about half the size of the biggest, the third is about a third of the size, and so on down the line. When you see this pattern, it usually suggests a pretty healthy, balanced urban system where goods and services are distributed pretty well across the country. And then you've got the total opposite of that, the primate city. This is where one single city is just massive. It's more than double the size of the next biggest city, and it completely dominates the country's economy, its culture, everything. Think Mexico City or London. This is really common in countries where power and money got funneled into one single hub, often during a colonial period. Okay, so that's city size, but what about city spacing? Why are they where they are? For that, we've got to look at Christler's central place theory. It all comes down to two simple economic ideas. Threshold is the minimum number of people a business needs to survive, and range is how far you're willing to go to get something, right? You'll probably only go 5 minutes for a cup of coffee, but you might drive for an hour to get to an IKEA. That basic logic explains why you see small towns with basic shops cluster together, while huge cities with all the specialized stuff are much farther apart. Okay, now let's zoom in. We've been talking about the whole network of cities, but what's going on inside just one city? What are the forces that shape where different things end up? The absolute foundation for understanding this is something called bid-rent theory. You can think of it like an economic tug-of-war for land. The land right in the heart of the city, the Central Business District, or CBD, is the easiest to get to, so everyone wants it, and that makes it crazy expensive. And as you move farther and farther out, the land gets cheaper. This simple fact shapes literally everything else. And this competition for land creates these really distinct patterns that geographers have modeled over time. The first big idea was the Burgess concentric zone model. It saw the city as a simple set of rings, kind of like a target with the CBD at the bullseye. Then the Hoyt sector model came along and said, wait a minute, cities don't just grow in perfect rings, they grow out in wedges, usually following things like train lines or major roads. And finally, the multiple nuclei model caught up to modern reality, recognizing that cities aren't built around one center anymore, but have lots of different centers, an airport over here, a university over there, you get the idea. But, and this is so important, those models are mostly based on North American cities. They don't work everywhere. When you look at global city models, you start to see how a region's unique history really shapes its urban DNA. For example, in the Latin American model, you often see this spine of wealthy neighborhoods stretching out from the center. Or in Southeast Asia, the whole city might be organized around an old colonial port instead of a CBD. And in some sub-Saharan African cities, you can even find 3 different CBDs, a colonial one, a traditional market one, and a modern one, all operating at the same time. It's fascinating. Okay, let's zoom in even closer now. What are the systems, the guts of a city, that actually make it work? And maybe more importantly, what happens when those systems aren't shared fairly? We're talking about infrastructure. This is the skeleton of the city. It's the roads and subways, the water pipes and power lines, the schools and hospitals. All the stuff we take for granted until it stops working. The quality of this skeleton basically determines a city's health and the well-being of everyone living in it. And here's the crucial part. Infrastructure is almost never distributed equally. The decisions about where to build a new subway line or which schools get the most funding are political, and over time, this creates what we call spatial inequality. It builds a city of haves and have-nots, where some neighborhoods are full of opportunities and others are systematically left behind. So, with so much at stake, how do city planners actually make these massive decisions? They can't just throw a dart at a map, right? They need information. They have to rely on data. And they need two kinds of it. First, there's quantitative data. That's the what, the hard numbers you get from the census, like how many people live somewhere, what their income is, things like that. But that only tells you half the story. To get the why, you need qualitative data. You have to go out and talk to people, do interviews, hear their stories about what it's actually like to live in their neighborhood. You need both to even begin to plan a city that truly works for everyone. All right, for our last chapter, let's pull the lens all the way back out. Let's look at the enormous challenges our cities are up against and some of the really brilliant solutions that are being developed to create a better urban future. One of the biggest hurdles is just dealing with the ugly legacy of past discrimination. Take redlining. Back in the day, the government literally drew red lines on maps around minority neighborhoods and declared them too risky for banks to give out loans. This practice starved these communities of money for decades, making it impossible to buy a home or start a business. And the effects of that are still with us today, trapping whole communities in these long cycles of poverty. So what's the fix for problems like urban sprawl and inequality? Well, a lot of cities are embracing ideas called smart growth. The goal is to build communities that are just smarter, better for the economy, better for the environment. This means mixing things up, putting apartments near offices and shops so you don't have to drive everywhere. It means designing neighborhoods that are easy and safe to walk in. And it means offering different kinds of housing so people at all income levels can live there, all while protecting green spaces from just endless development. Another really cool strategy is taking on brownfields. These are old industrial sites, basically land that's been left polluted and useless. Instead of letting them just sit there and rot, cities can go in, clean them up, and totally transform them into amazing community spaces. Parks, trails, new housing, like what they did in Atlanta with the Beltline. It's a total game changer. And really, this gets to the absolute core of what modern urban planning is all about. True sustainability is a balancing act. You're trying to juggle three things that are often in conflict. You need a strong economy with jobs, you need a healthy environment with clean air, and you need social equity, meaning everyone has a fair shot at housing and services. It's tough, but that's the goal. Now, why should you care about all of this? Well, if you're taking the AP Human Geography exam, this is absolutely crucial. Unit 6 makes up a huge piece of the test, somewhere between 12 and 17%. And you can bet you'll see questions that ask you to compare these models or analyze urban data, so you gotta know this stuff. So let's end with this. For the first time ever, more than half of all people on Earth live in cities. These places are the engines of our world. Understanding how they work, how they grow, and how they fail isn't just for an exam. It's about figuring out how we can design a future that's not just bigger, but better, more sustainable, and more fair for every single one of us.